Okay.
All right. So I am Dave Mansur. My wife Mary and I have been keeping bees since 1997. We um, we actually started as candle makers before we were beekeepers, and that started at the what was then the Cape Ann Waldorf School, where I signed up to be a helper at the holiday fair, getting the candle dipping room, the beeswax candle dipping room going and met people there that I'm still friends with. Um, and it was so profound. I remember standing there watching children make beeswax candles, and one of the grandparents was standing next to me, and the look on his face, and he looked up at me and said, "They will always remember this is how a candle is made." And it really hit him very deeply. So we fell in love with the whole process. And so when Andrew asked me to talk about bees, I was happy, just delighted to take the opportunity. There's so much material, right? So this is like bees and anthroposophy, my two favorite things to talk about. There are more technical articles written on bees than on any other domesticated animal, like by far. And then you have the published works in English of Rudolf Steiner. So there are 4,000 plus lectures. So if you read one a day, it'll take 11 years. Uh, so these past couple of weeks have been a process of sifting it down. I thought it would be cheeky to start with any questions but we'll have time at the end to have questions. I'm going to share my screen now. I'll probably bounce in and out of this a bit, but uh, slideshow. There we go. So I have the broad title of "Listening to the Bees," and this is a quote attributed to John Weir that when one tugs at a single thing in nature, he finds it attached to the rest of the world. And our experience has been that the honeybees have led us personally. So some of this will be personal journey, some of it will be, technical, and some of it will be maybe lyrical, I hope. But I've met wonderful people. I continue to meet wonderful people through the bees. And the bees also open up my eyes to what's going on in nature. I was a little bit numb or just not very observant of what was going on in nature. But now when you have bees, you get a better sense of what flowers are blooming when, how are they blooming, how much rain is going on, and so forth. When are they spraying for mosquitoes in the area? Those types of things. So this little insect has the power to really lead us into a lot of remarkable places. Let's see, advance. There we go. So uh, we most of what we're going to talk about tonight comes from a couple of sources. One is a book that Rudolf Steiner, a book of lectures published by Rudolf Steiner, which is 9 lectures on bees, and he gave these to the workers at the Goetheanum, and I was pretty surprised when I finally did look. So take a look at this date, December 22nd, 1923. Anyone know of anything that might have been going on that week at the Goetheanum? That's the week of the Christmas conference, right? So in the midst of preparing that massive transformative conference that we're still, enjoying the fruits of, he took time to give 9 lectures on bees these were to the workers at the Goetheanum, and then in addition to this, uh, Mary and I took. Along with our son Michael, took a 3-year course, part-time course in beekeeping at Spikenard Farm. If you haven't been to Spikenard Farm in Floyd, Virginia, I would highly recommend it. At the time, it was founded by Gunter and Vivian Hawk, and now Alex Tuckman. Here's Alex. There's Gunter at the table. Vivian is here, and it was founded by them, and it's a thriving community centered around the honeybee. It's in Floyd, Virginia, which is an amazing place. So if you haven't been there, put it on your bucket list. It's worth it. They have continually having weekend workshops and such. Even if you're not a beekeeper, you'll learn a lot about nature and bees. This is my favorite picture of me and Mary. these these are our hands clearing some bees off of a bit of freshly drawn comb. And, we got our kids into it early, and here they are covered with bees. It's my son, Stephen, who's also a beekeeper. Um, and right now, hands-on, we're managing about 7 beehives, give or take, depending on what the bees do. So, any talk on honeybees, I think we need to do a little bit of basics. So, this is, these are the So it's interesting. In English, we use, English language. So we call it the honeybee colony, right? And then we talk about the members of the honeybee colony as the queen, the worker, and the drone. In Slovenia, we went to Slovenia, which has a very deep and long beekeeping tradition. It's kind of a national part of the national identity. And they talk about the honeybee family. And so it's not a colony, it's a family. It's not a queen, it's the mother. It's not it's not a worker bee, it's the sister bees. It's not the drone, it's the brother bees. So these are the main inhabitants, and we'll go into each one of them in some more detail. So right around the time we started beekeeping, these were the only inhabitants that you would find in the beehive, were either the queen bee, the worker bee, or the drone. Now, and we'll talk about the impact of this, for the past 30 years or so, um, there's been this infestation of parasites, really deadly parasites, the Varroa destructor, which is a parasite that latches onto the pupae of the honeybee and on their bodies, and they're easy to see. And think in terms of if there was a tick the size of a dinner plate, in terms of the relative size. So it's a big parasite. And then not so much around here, but down south, there's the small hive beetle that just gets in and it doesn't hurt the bees so much, but it eats all the honey and defecates in the honey. They're a real pest. That's fairly new. But anyway, the happy parts are these 3 folks right here. And then in the middle, there's a nice picture here of what an egg looks like, and a larva and a pupa. And we're not going to go into a lot of honeybee biology right now, but if you have questions after, we can go pretty deep. Um, and go through and talk about each of our inhabitants. So the sister bees, the worker bees, this is sort of the archetypal bee. These are the ones that you're going to see mostly out on the flowers. These are the ones that are predominantly present in the beehive itself. There are about 50 or 60,000 of them in a thriving beehive in midsummer. And the worker bees have tasks that are specific to their age. And so they're all female. They're female, which means that, so anyway, they are female, and they have these tasks that they go through depending on their age. The first job, as soon as they're born, I love telling this to kids, as soon as they're born, their first job is to clean their room. They clean up the cell that they were born in and get it ready for its next inhabitant. And from there, then they become, they become caretakers to the younger bees, to the eggs, and to the larvae. Then they do the job of storing the nectar, taking care of the food supplies, building the comb, building the honeycomb. Then they start moving out. So they'll guard the entrance of the hive, and then finally they forage. So they go out and they gather pollen, they gather nectar, they gather water, and their whole lifespan in the summertime is about 30 days. This stuff all happens in the first couple of weeks, and then they forage for a couple of weeks until basically their wings fail. They go out with the sun and they come back with the sun. Now, in the winter, their tasks are a little different. In the winter, there's no foraging to be done. and it's really a matter of maintaining the hive. They need to keep the queen warm. They need to make sure that food gets to the queen and to their other sisters. They need to clean out the bees that die. And if possible, they'll take a cleansing flight if it gets, those warm days in January. So this is an amazing thing about bees is they will not defecate in the hive. So they basically hold it all winter long. So when the when the cleansing flight is available, if you're a beekeeper, it's a good idea to tell your neighbors to not hang their laundry because there's just going to be it's yellow poop and it really stains. But they'll live for about 4 months if they're born in the winter. So they cluster around the queen. They try to keep her warm. If you happen to be on the outside of the cluster of the ball when it gets really cold, those bees freeze and die and are, the cluster shrinks and moves through the honey with the queen at the center. Another thing about the worker bee, so bees are a truly social animal, meaning that there really is a renunciation of any kind of individuality. And in particular with the worker bees, so here's the anatomy of the it says honeybee, but this is the worker bee, right? And there are she does have ovaries. She is able to lay eggs, but that is surrendered. They except in extreme cases, they will not make an attempt to procreate. They surrender that over to the queen, to the mother. And another thing that's so there's a theme in the honeybee world, the honeybee culture is this theme of sacrifice, and so that's the worker bee's sacrifice. And there's another theme that it's that theme of love. So you see this quote from Steiner down here: "The honeybee lives as if in an air thoroughly saturated with love." They gather the food that they gather, the pollen and the nectar. These comes from those parts of the plant that are concerned with the procreation of the plant, right? So the love life of the plant, if you will, and then they come into that hive where they've surrendered any sense of individuality or any sense of procreation to the greater good of the honeybee colony, of the honeybee family. Next crew that you'll see in here are the drones, the brother bees. And in midsummer, there would be about 500 or so of those. And the drones are made as a public service to other bees. They can and they will at times drift from one colony to another. And they really only have one job. So they don't even feed themselves. This is a picture of a drone. They're much larger, you can see, and they have these big silly eyes there, and they don't have a stinger. And so in the morning, one of the sister bees will load up the drone and he'll go off and he'll congregate around a puddle somewhere with other drones on the off chance that a virgin queen flies by. And in a process that is still not 100% understood, they sense that this virgin queen is flying by and they will take off after her. And then his job is just to fly as fast as they can. So the queen flies toward the sun, hence the name of the movie that Andrew mentioned, Queen of the Sun. The queen flies up towards the sun higher and higher, and the drones will chase after her, and she'll mate with about 6 or 7 drones and gather a lifetime of semen that she stores. And this picture down here is kind of how it all works. So the drone will catch up with the queen. The insemination intercourse happens. Now, similar to the worker's stinger, the drone's penis is barbed. And so when he pulls away, he dies and falls to the ground. And this is a really good day for a drone. This is like fulfilling their destiny. But again, sacrifice, right? For the greater good. We mate with the queen. I get to pass my seed along to the queen, but then I will die. And the other thing that happens in the winter, so the drones have no use in the winter. And so they're kicked out of the hive in late fall. And you'll see this happening, and they'll kind of try to get back in, but they're basically told at the door, sorry. And then they just go out and, meet their end with the elements. Um, Sometimes you can think of the drones as being because they will go from hive to hive. That's sort of like the news from other colonies gets passed along by these drones. They're sort of I used to like to say that they're sort of the storytellers. We do that, and so I was working with some children this year and talked about the drones being the storytellers. But then in the fall, when little Philip saw them being kicked out of the hive, he looked at me and said, "Won't they need their storytellers in the winter?" So from the mouths of babes. So that one kind of broke my heart. So that's the story of the drones. They're pretty remarkable creatures, and they get their name because if you sit by a beehive, you can hear them come in. They have this loud drone. Oh, okay, good. All right. The queen bee, the mother bee. There is one and only one queen bee in the whole hive. And the queen bee, there are so many mysteries around her, but she lays about 1,000 eggs a day at the height of summer. And that's more than her body weight. I don't still can't quite figure out how that all works. You can do the calculations for sure as to how much honey and how much pollen that's needed. But what you'll see when you find her, she'll be walking around. She's larger, but not a lot larger. But she's identifiable. She has these longer legs, and she's got this shiny back. All the rest of the honeybees are furry little creatures, but the queen is a shiny creature. Some beekeepers will mark her with some paint so you can tell what well, it's easier to find her, and you can also color code what year she was born in. But anyway, you'll see her walking around in the beehive with her attendants who are cleaning her, feeding her, and then gently directing her to a cell that is ready for another egg. And she'll lower that nice long abdomen down into the middle and plunk an egg right into the middle, like we saw before. So, so how are queens made is a pretty common question, and the queens are made by workers. What you need is a fertilized egg. Oh, that's something that's interesting about bees is that the female bees, queens and workers, are the result of a fertilized egg being laid and coming to maturity. The drones, the male bees, are the result of an unfertilized egg being laid and raised to maturity. So the genetics are really quite different, but it results in this is a fun cocktail party thing for you is that drones, male bees, don't have fathers, but they do have grandfathers. So that's just something to keep. But to make a queen, they need a fertilized egg, and and then sort of three things happen that are different. So worker cells and drone cells are hexagonal and horizontal to gravity, relative to gravity. The queen cell has to change its orientation to gravity. It's vertical. It's aligned to the sun, right? It's vertical and it's round, so it has again that sun shape to it, that more approximating the circular, the round sun. And then she's fed a special diet, um, whereas the workers and the drones will get in their larval stage are fed protein that comes from from pollen and carbohydrates from honey, and a little bit of what's called royal jelly, which is a substance that the worker bees excrete from a gland in their heads. If you've seen it, it's white. But the queen is fed a pure diet of that. So if you read in mainstream bee books, you hear a lot about royal jelly, and that's what makes a queen. And they kind of neglect this whole change in form and change in orientation. Uh, as you can imagine, in any kind of biodynamic approach, form and shape are considered to a great extent. So that's what you need to make a queen. And this stuff is all pretty much on the surface. You could go deep on any one of these topics. Things you might find in a beehive. So here's a picture of a frame that has most everything going on. You see, there's the wax that they build. Fun fact again that honeybees have no means of storing fat on their body. So as they consume excess calories, they excrete it as wax, and then they chew that wax up to make their homes. which is a great system. So if you want to put on an addition, just eat more. And that's what they do. And then you'll find honey, you'll find pollen, you'll find these light, sort of flat capped ones are where the worker bees are going to come out, and then these lumpy ones are where the male bees are a little bigger. And this is another good picture of the queen on the capped brood walking around. And you can really, a good way to think about the bees when you're approaching the beehive. Yes, there are the individual members of the family, but the living thing is the colony. That whole colony that we keep in wooden boxes, or the bees are cavity dwellers. They'll find any cavity and build the frame, build up on it. That's the living thing, and you can find in very specific areas. It's very ordered and very specific. Uh, a midgut where digestion is happening. They actually will ferment honey and pollen together, and so before they eat it, bees don't eat bee pollen. The bee pollen that you see in the store, they don't eat that. They mix it with honey and ferment it, and that's what they eat. But that's like a digestion that's going on in the comb, and then of course the reproduction is going on in the comb. Um, so that's bees in a nutshell. And if we're going to talk about beekeeping, we can talk about that's the intersection of honeybees and human beings. So here's some human being basics. These are notes that I took pictures of from notes that we took at Spikenard Farm, and this will be familiar, I think, to this whole crowd. But as a human being, we have these sort of earthbound bodies. This is just right out of any anthroposophical book that Steiner wrote. He'll talk about this physical body, right? Just mostly what carbon and iron, water, a little bit of calcium thrown in. I think it's about $4.25 worth of chemicals, and it follows all of the laws that any rock follows, right? It will without life, it will decompose and follow all of the laws of any mineral. Then we have our etheric body, which brings life to that lump of minerals. And then we have our astral body, which gives us direction and purpose and desire, right? So that we have all of these aspects. These are all observable on Earth. These all have corresponding spiritual components. And this is a pretty key thing, right? As to what is a human being? Who are we as we sit here? This is going on right now, right? This isn't something that is so esoteric. Well, it is esoteric, but it is going on right now. As I sit here, I have this observable part. I have this part that still stays in the spirit world. And then there's all of this coming and going back and forth. And this is my soul body. I have a soul body that allows me to see the world, the soul body to form a relationship with the world, and then a soul body that allows me to be conscious of my place in the world. And my I emerges from and works on these things. And with that, we connect to the spiritual world. And this is our responsibility. So we have responsibilities to bring this forth. We're in the process of becoming the 10th hierarchy. I hope I talked about it earlier. We have a responsibility to the bees too, because they're a domesticated animal. Actually, I'll get into that a little in a later slide, I think. And then we have all of these spirits. When we talk about connecting to the spiritual world, there are all of these different spirits of form and movement and will. And I think these are wrong. I copied these out of my notes. I think I've got these flipped, but harmony and love. But the idea is that we are beings here on Earth. There is a spiritual world. It is inhabited by beings, and we are in the process of creating relationships with that. And the beings on Earth are here to help us with that. Okay, a little putting us in place here as to where we are. I think, again, this crew is probably all familiar with this, the different planetary evolutions. And, we are in this Earth evolution, and the Earth has gone through an incarnation and a rest period, a paralaya, paralaya, and dissolution, and come back and forth. And there was a time before ours that was referred to as Atlantis, and we are here. We're in post-Atlantean periods. We're in the fifth subdivision of the fourth stage of Earth evolution. Um, and I bring this in because the history of human beings interacting with honeybees, according to Rudolf Steiner in these bee lectures, is here in Atlantis. That's where it began. I'm going to skip to a yeah, maybe not. That's where it began. So, and we'll come back to that. So this is, we have our human being, we have our honeybee, we have our cosmic history, and there's a lot to try to pull together. And in the training at Spikenard, one thing that we were encouraged was, start with something simple. So, like I said, there's so much scientific stuff out there written about bees, and you can, you can get lost in it pretty quickly. It has its place, but in terms of like really forming that connection with the bees, we're encouraged to start with something simple. So we have these four elements: it's earth, water, air or light, fire. Right? Let's start there, and then we can associate those with different kingdoms within within our earthly existence. So we have the mineral world, the plant world, that associates with water, the animal that has this airiness, this ability to move around, and then this human kingdom, right? In Steiner's taxonomy, we're not animals. We are each human being is its own species. I am my own species, separate from, distinct from you. That, and then we can take a look at the different parts of our body. So our physical body certainly corresponds to the earth element. The etheric body corresponds to the water element. And then this astral body, again, with this air and light moving around. And then the eye is that fire element. And now if we take a look at the bees, we kind of work it the other way around, because there's sort of a surprise down at the bottom where the queen would be the closest thing. It's not an ego, but it's that central bit. And then we saw that the drones move from place to place, so maybe they're air, light, and the workers are bringing life to the hive. And the earth body is the honeycomb. And this is something that differentiates sort of the biodynamic beekeeping approach. A lot of mainstream beehives are made of plastic. It's quick. The bees will build it out fast. You'll get quick production out of it. But in the biodynamic methods, the comb is really something that is it is their physical body, and you really want to let them build their physical body, let them work. So that's sort of things that differentiate sort of the anthroposophical biodynamic look at beekeeping from the mainstream is, I'd call it a reverence or an appreciation for the comb, the honeycomb. And we could spend a long time on this too. Maybe I should have, but I'm going to keep moving. And so those are sort of, you can build that up and start, we have those four elements, and you start building up. So the similarities between human beings and bees, as a beekeeper, you want to know what is that relationship, and also the differences. I forgot to look it up. So we talked about the difference between death of a human being and the death of an animal. So in Slovenian, there are two words for death. One that is used for plants and animals in general, and one that is used for human beings or honeybees. So it's really deep in the culture. But so when a human spirit dies, we do that. We're in that process that was in the previous slide of working these soul bodies and trying to bring about these this new spiritual hierarchy. The animals, the bees included, go back into that group soul. And So yeah, we're evolving from a cosmos of wisdom into a cosmos of love, and the animals have fallen into this group soul. They are no longer evolving along that path of consciousness. Their physical bodies may evolve, but they're not moving that. And it's at this really long pace. It takes a long time, and we're always being tempted to speed things up, right? This is the Aramonic temptation of the beekeeper. Let's get going. Let's get some more production out of these things. And sometimes it's a good idea to just say no. Let's not do that. Let's recognize that things are moving, and they're moving at a divine pace. So, okay. Next bit is swarms. We had mentioned swarms, and it, so this is a swarm that Mary and I gathered, and it was yeah, again, it was similar to what Andrew mentioned. Was, people were worried, people weren't going out. There was this swarm of bees, and it turns out that bees are amazingly docile when they're swarming because they sting to protect their home. And at this point, they're homeless. And here's me picking up another swarm that we found. You can just reach right into them, and they, yeah, they just won't sting, and they're very warm, and it's a wonderful thing to do. And if you're there when they're actively swarming, it's mighty. It's like a thunderstorm, right? It's a mighty force of nature. So um, in the bee lectures, Rudolf Steiner talks about. He says that the honeybee swarm is a perfect picture of reincarnation. And so I want to talk a little bit about what that. I'm going to stop sharing here and let's just talk. So the so what happens in the honeybee swarm is that the old queen leaves with the old bees. They all leave. They take some honey with them, but they leave everything else behind. They leave behind everything that they've built. They leave behind eggs that are laid, that are ready to go. That's all left behind. So that's very similar to my life on Earth, right? I'm going to leave behind some sort of karmic footprint. These are the things that I did, and then they're going to go off, and and they wander in this chaotic swarm, and then they settle in a place, and they start to look for their next home. They start to look for their next home, and they can be sometimes guided by a beekeeper. Sometimes I had this amazing experience where we had an empty beehive, and there was a swarm, and Mary and I were in the garden. You could see the bees coming and going, and you could feel that those bees that were coming and looking at it were just an unbroken connection to the queen all the way up in that tree. And they didn't end up taking that hive, but it was remarkable to see them feeling it. And then when they do find a home, another remarkable thing happens. So, we talked about all of the things that are age-related tasks of the workers. They stop doing their old bee tasks. They stop foraging and become young bees again. They start making wax. They start right away making wax. The queen will rejuvenate and start laying again and start a new colony. Right. So it's this whole process of I have made my mark in the world, and it is for better or for worse. This is what I've left to those who are young, and now I'm rejuvenated and I come again. So in mainstream beekeeping, there's a lot of techniques to make sure your bees don't swarm because you know they take the honey with them, and I have nothing against gathering honey. Honest to God, I don't. But it really pushes you into some interesting choices because swarming is a sign of a really, really healthy hive. And so there are techniques for being able to, if you're at Spikenard Farm, when you're there and you're taking a lecture and a honey and one of the hive swarms, everything stops and you go collect the swarm. That's the best way to do it. There are other ways to do it too, to give them the experience of swarming, but it's the only days off they get too. They get 2 or 3 days where they're not working, and it's hilarious to see a whole bunch of bees hanging around not working. But that's anyway. that's another big area that we could go into. Um, and it's the type of thing that you know you're only going to get through a biodynamic or anthroposophical approach to beekeeping. Let's see. All right, so history I talked about a little bit. So, the honeybee was made in Atlantis. So there's a challenge for you. And it was made from a fire wasp and a fig wasp. And there was like this deep cooperation between the honeybees and the humans. So this predates, where we are now in this Earth evolution. This is the previous Earth evolution. And so like as far as the written historical record goes, so here's a cave painting. We knew about gathering honey from bees, 10,000 years ago. And then by the, Egyptian and even pre-Egyptian now, we found evidence of actual, deliberate keeping of bees. So this is a relationship that goes way back. And an interesting, a fun thing about, how we made the honeybee from these fig wasps. We're kind of doing that with dogs, right? These things take a long time. And I couldn't find it, but I saw this New Yorker cartoon of two wolves in the cold outside of a cave, and there's a fire going in the cave, and one wolf says to the other, "Well, let's just go in and get warm. What's the worst that can happen?" And then the next frame is a poodle out with bows and ribbons on it, right? So over millions of years, these things happen. So the honeybees, we have an ancient responsibility toward them, and they are a domesticated animal now. Honeybees in the wild don't don't do well. And here's we'll get into the bad news one is that so this map up top is some of the main pollinators get moved all over the place. And every year around just right around this time, 2/3 of all the honeybees in the United States are here in the Central Valley pollinating the almond crop. And then they go back out. And what happened, so this is the number of honey producing bee colonies, the US Department of Agriculture tracked that. And then there's this drop. And this is where the varroa mite came in. Varroa mite came in from some hives that were being a monoculture farm in Indonesia that the Russians were doing. They came across Europe. Somebody imported some of those bees into Florida, right, in 1981, 82. They've got it to the time and date right now. And then it moved in these paths into the Central Valley where it met everybody else, and it was an explosion. This only goes out to 2007. There was the colony collapse disorder was another real scare. It was a real wake up call. Like the bees were dying like crazy. Between the varroa mite and that was the introduction of neonicotinoid pesticides, and it was a wake up call. The bees did not die out. It's normalized, but there are huge losses every year. 50 to 60% of the honeybee stock dies every year. But I will say, I mean, you know, so Queen of the Sun, Gunter Hawk, he had a big impact. This is one of those areas where I do believe that the anthroposophical community was there and ready. Rudolf Steiner predicted this in the bee lectures. These mechanized methods of beekeeping are going to be, you're going to do really well for a while, but in about 60 years, you're probably going to have some sort of payback. He even mentioned maybe a parasite or something, and that's what happened 60 years later. But so the first thing that was done, this is triage, was we put a bunch of pesticides in the beehives, and nobody wanted to do that. And within a matter of a few years, people figured out that you could use existing chemicals that are already in the hive, formic acid, oxalic acid, to manage these things. And so, and then the neonicotinoid use has really been cut way back, and all of these things. So I think, while I don't know that we'll ever get back to these glory days, that there is, to me, there's hope. Like in the mainstream beekeeping community, people said, no, this is not acceptable that we're just going to be putting poison in the beehives, right? And so we found ways out. And there's a real awareness. You see pollinator gardens everywhere, and so I'm encouraged by that. But this is still going on, of course. That these major pollinator migrations, for monoculture crops. All right, so kind of coming down the end here. So the bees gave us this major wake up call. These are some Gunter Hawk quotes. Every crisis is an opportunity. No sacrifice goes unrewarded. And we are in this place where there are two streams of time, right? There's the one that's behind us that is the stream of wisdom, and this, ancient streams of time. And you see the effects of it in the wisdom of nature and how any of this stuff ever works at all. And then coming towards us is the stream of love. So you can draw it in a timeline like this, that in the past, the mind of God, right? The mind of God had this idea of a being that could support a consciousness, that could support an I, and started this process, and all of the evolution that we know about, is involved in all of that. But all the time coming to us from the future is this Sophia knowledge, right? And we're in the middle. This is the now. So we have the past, which is head centered, it's intellect, it's male, it's dense, domination, right? Dominate all of the species, Adam. Go out and do that. Um, Coming to us from the future is, it's sort of these will forces. It's a female force. It's a vulnerable force. It's a nurturing force that we all need to be practicing. Right? We all have that inner voice, right? That I think we all have that inner voice saying that, I should be caring for what's around me, and we want to amplify that. A lot of anthroposophy has, my experience with it has to do with that. Um, and the bees are already out here. They're already in tune with this, the sacrifice, the nurturing, total service and love to what it is needed for the future. That so the bees are our messenger. They will pull us into this realm of the future, or pull the realm of the future towards us. This will, this Sophia will, it's an unconscious characteristic that we carry in us, and it comes from the future. Right? And it's up to us what to do with that. And if we take a lesson from the bees, right, everything is geared for this loving service to the whole world. And there's a vulnerability that the honeybees model for us, for a path to a healing for the future. I love this poem. There's what I love about this poem. It's probably many of you are familiar with it. That I had a beehive here inside my heart, and the golden bees were making white combs and sweet honey from my old failures. It it's easy to close our eyes to the problem. The problems that show up and manifest themselves as things like colony collapse disorder. It's easy to beat ourselves up over it. What's hard is to transform it, right? What's hard is to transform it, and a life built around principles of spiritual science, of caring, and of love is really always looking for that, right? Okay, we don't deny that there were failures. We don't give up on it. We recognize that there were failures, but they can be transformed. And we do that by, working with one another and talking with one another. And I think recognizing what we are, right? I think it's always important whenever I get an opportunity to talk about these, is to recognize that we are not these programmed meat robots that the 21st century world would have us believe, right? We are the idea of God, and we are actively participating in progressing and evolution that is required for not just here on earth, but for the spiritual world to go on. So I mean, we've got all that going for us. And so if we gather together around these causes, we're going to be okay. And close with a lovely quote from Rudolf Steiner: "We're going to be okay. We're going to know one another. We'll find our tribe. We'll find our helpers, and the spiritual goals that draw people together form the most noble bonds of friendship." Um, Thank you for coming and listening to this very surface level survey of my experience and my wife's experience at the intersection of anthroposophy and bees. I think we have some time for questions.
I hope so. I think we do. Let me go back to um, gallery. Come on, gallery. Come on. There we go. And John, welcome from Rhode Island.
Hey, John.
So, any questions that anybody have? I have about 7 to 30. So we'll
Okay.
start with Joyce.
One is very quick. I was wondering who wrote the poem.
Uh, I don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so one question for you. Um, I remember, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere, maybe it was in Queen of the Sun, it was talking about artificial queen development, the
Mm-hmm.
developments. And
Mm-hmm.
I think Steiner pointed to that as well, saying
Yeah.
that it's going to reduce the um, bee's ability to fight off mites and other sort of
Yeah.
illnesses, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's quite a bit in the bee lectures about that, and yeah, that's where he kind of made his famous prediction of 60 years from now. The point being that I guess that's the luciferic temptation of beekeeping. The point is that we absolutely can raise queen bees that are far superior to the bees that the bees make themselves based on criteria that we define, which are certainly different than the criteria that the bees define. And so we're missing things that we don't even see, right? And then that was his notion, is that it's um, his notion that it would yeah,
Right,
whatever it was that we were missing, they were going to need it, and we were going to breed it out of them.
right.
Oh, Antonio Machado is who the
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
So this other thing, I find it interesting. I think Steiner said something about the beehive as a picture for future human social life. And of course, it led to a picture that is not what Steiner said, but a person could make the wrong interpretation from it. And it goes like this, that in this future time, all the women have to do all the work. And all that the men have to do is go to the pub and hang out in the pub until one of those young queens decides to take her maiden flight. And
Yeah,
then you go fly after her because this is what you've been dreaming of
you want
doing.
to stay in good shape. Yeah,
But it's what, like 98% of those drones can't reach
yeah,
where she flies to.
yeah.
And it's only a very few of the ones that have been doing all their exercises every morning that can get to her.
That got there. Yeah.
Well,
So that he talks about the the honeybee is a truly social animal, and Steiner in the bee lectures does mention there is one other animal that is more truly social than the bees. Any guesses?
fish
Close. You're in the right direction.
or crow?
Yeah. Coral.
Coral. Okay.
Mm,
Coral.
mm.
So, that's a complete kind of uniform distribution of responsibility. But
Right.
you know, there are
Interesting.
there are various layers, and so of course we're going through a period now where we're the antithesis of that here in this age of the consciousness soul, right? It's important for us to feel our individuality right now. Um, and and it also I think because we can feel our individuality gives us the ability to sacrifice,
Right.
in a conscious way. The bees are making these sacrifices, but you have to be a little careful, right? Because their experience is not the same as ours. Their consciousness is not on that level. It's a different king. It's as different from us as the plants are from the animals. Right?
Right.
It's a different kingdom.
We have a foster daughter who's now 27, doesn't live with us, but when she did, she learned at school one day that honey is made by the regurgitation of bees. And before that, she loved to eat honey. It took her about 3 months to recover from that and
Mhm.
eat honey again. Any
Yeah.
comments on that?
I, 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 I do. So you'll be glad to know that the bees have two stomachs. There's a nectar stomach that they carry the nectar back with and use it to transfer it from cell to cell. And then there's their regular stomach that they eat and do digestion. So never the two shall meet. so so but it does pick up, there is a biological process involved in that honey stomach. There's some enzymes that do get put in, but it's not a digestive process per se, although kind of. I guess you could say it's sort of like, how digestion starts in the mouth as soon as we start chewing things. It's similar to that, but it's not like that full digestion that, you know, and the regurgitation it's not nearly like that. And plus, anyway, it's nectar. I think it was Dennis Klochek when I was at the workshop with him had this beautiful description of nectar that so let's see so nighttime falls and the waters are in the ground, and then some of the water that had evaporated out through the day starts to fall down. So the water goes back up to the heavens to get its instructions, comes back down, and some of the water comes up from the earth after it's had time to parlay with the gnomes and sits there. And that's what the bees go and pick up. That's the nectar.
Nice. Any other questions from anybody?
Oh, I had a question, but I
Oh, good. Go ahead, Barbara.
I actually have forgotten it. But I was just wondering, when a colony swarms,
Mm-hmm.
um, and a beekeeper or one of these societies goes and gets it, who are the society of beekeepers,
Yeah.
they go and get it. And if they're anthroposophical guys, then they put it into um, a little box that has no frames hanging in it. Is that right? I'm so used to seeing these boxes with all these frames with these plastic, forms that they draw
Yeah.
out. So is it almost just like? I mean, ideally, is it just like a cavity of a tree where they would swarm and they would go into that cavity and do their own thing, like find a stick or whatever. I don't know how they manage, but
So, so one of the things. So this is what a frame looks like for me. So we do use the wooden frames. A lot of biodynamic beekeepers do. Some of them use just the top bar where you put that on, so you can pick that
okay.
up. But we let the bees build all of the comb. One of the great discoveries that was made mid 19th century was the bee space. So the bees in nature in a tree, they start building down from the top of the cavity, and they maintain this space, which is 3/8 of an inch in between combs. If it's if there's a space in that cavity that's greater than 3/8 of an inch, they fill it with wax. And then if there's a cavity that's smaller than 3/8 of an inch, they'll seal that up with propolis, which I didn't even talk about, which is kind of an antiseptic glue. But but through our observations, we discovered this 3/8 of an inch rule. And so Mr. Langstroth, who's a Massachusetts native, invented this frame. And the spacing is such that when you put them together and they start building wax in there, the comb will be 3/8 of an inch apart and they'll stop. And that allows us to pick them up and inspect them and look at them and see what's going on. There's a lot of, the old skeps, those didn't have that. They were just straw, and the bees would build their comb down. Um, in order to harvest honey from those, you ended up killing a lot of bees. So there is a humane aspect to this, and there are down at Spikenard, they're forever experimenting with different forms in different hives, because you do want to allow that, that drawing out of comb. It's really important, and when you are in the beehive, an active beehive, that comb is pliable. It's like muscle. It's what it feels like, and they communicate on it. They vibrate it, and they communicate on this thing. So it really is a living part of the living organ. But so I really hate seeing, the modern hives. In fact, this picture up here is actually, you can tell from looking at it. See where it's black in the background. They have this black plastic down the middle with plastic imprints, and they even put a little bit of wax on it so the bees don't have to do much work, and it's black so it's easy to see the eggs. But my goodness, it's you know I ask the question when we have these discussions. Would you be better off if somebody like brought you your food on the couch all day every day, and fed you that diet, even if it was a relatively healthy diet? Would you be better off doing that, or would you be better off getting up and making your own food sometimes? And so this idea of, we want to like make it easy for the bees, is another one of those things that so Gunther talked about the story of Ahriman's boots. You guys know this story? So
No,
there's this
tell
guy.
us.
So this guy wanted to be able to jump 10 feet, and Ahriman said, "Well, I got these boots let you jump 10 feet. So now I can jump 10 feet." He said, "Boy, could really go for some 20-foot jumping boots." And Ahriman said, "Yeah, I got 20-foot boots. Here you go, jump. Now I can jump 20 feet. This is amazing." And he says, "What about 40-foot? Would you like some 40-foot boots?" "Yes, yes, give me the 40-foot boots." And he jumps, and boom, there's a chain attached to them and pulls him right down to the ground. And he said, "Oh yeah," Ahriman says, "I should have told you, the 40-foot boots have a 30-foot chain attached to them." So all of these conveniences that we build up absolutely will work at first. But every time we do that, we are putting a direction onto the bees that the bees may or probably wouldn't have done on their own. But as it stands right now, so Thomas Seeley out in Western Mass is doing a lot of really interesting work. One thing he's finding is that, because we thought the bees would just die out, feral bees were dying out because of the mites, right? The mites kill them. They're a vector for viruses. But what the bees are doing, he's been tracking a bunch of feral colonies. They've adapted. And one way they've adapted is they've made smaller colonies. Like the average size, he gets grad students to go out and do field work every day, but the average size of the colony has shrunk. But the survival rate of feral colonies, just by number, has increased. So the bees are figuring this out, right? They're starting the process of coevolution with these mites, which, and that's a million-year process. That's not a 10-year process.
But what is the purpose of a smaller hive? How beneficial for the bees? What does that serve them?
So we think, we don't know, but we think it has to do with hygiene. It's easier to keep clean because you can brush like I said, those mites are big, and the bees will brush them off. There are all kinds of methods to count the mites at the bottom, and sometimes counting a lot of mites means that you're in trouble, but sometimes it means you have a really hygienic hive.
Hmm.
You know,
You
so
said that when the baby bee is just first born, one of its jobs is to clean its room.
Yeah.
and to make its bed. Are those the main ones that clean those little mites away, the baby bees? Are they the cleaners, or do the females who go out and get honey, do they also come home and clean up?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I would think that the ones who are the house bees and the nurse bees are probably going to take the primary responsibility. You'll see them always like, but that's a great question. I don't know if anyone's done that research. I mean, the foraging bees come back in every night, and so if they're carrying mites, they'll. Yeah. Oh no, my power saver just came on.
Dave, thanks so much for coming. It was just wonderful to have you.
Yeah,
Oh, fabulous.
yes, it
Really
was.
great
So in
talk.
case your power saver is going to shut you down soon, we can
Yeah.
finish up. But thank you, as people have been saying, it's wonderful. And we will have another June meeting, but that one will be looking at, so all of you can get prepared, the new Anthroposophical Society's statutes, and we'll be talking about that, what
Yeah.
was just done at the AGM at the Gertianum. So that's our June meeting, and then we have our AGM right after that. So I think that AGM is on the day that would have been the first class, but we don't have one in June. So
Right. Works out. Okay.
thank you all for coming.
Thank you for coming. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, Andrew.
Stay well, and may your bees be strong.
And your
Thanks, Sandra.
candles are wonderful. I love your candles, Dave.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's Mary. She's a champ. She is like literally a champion candle maker.
Give her
Thanks.
our love too. Okay. Bye.
Will do.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Andrew, for bringing it.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.